Another week in America means another week where the Trump administration is coming to the defense of sexual predators. And I'm not talking about the Epstein case. Trump's DOJ has decided to get involved in a fight between the state of Washington and the Catholic Church in a legal case that may have national implications. Let's give some context. Recently, the state of Washington passed a bill that would make the clergy of any religious institution mandatory reporters for child sex abuse. Now, the majority of the states already classify clergy as mandatory reporters. However, only 8 states do not provide an exception for confessionals and do not provide an exception for certain interactions between clergy and individual citizens when those conversations are considered to be private. When the state of Washington passed this new bill, the Catholic Church pretty much immediately sued. In the Catholic Church, it is forbidden for a priest to discuss anything that is talked about in the confessional chamber, no matter how sinister that activity is. So the Catholic Church argued that essentially this law would put a priest in a situation where they had to choose between following the state law and doing something that could get them excommunicated. So now we have a classic legal battle between state religious freedom and the right of the state to impose its law among its people. What makes this situation weird is that the DOJ decided to step in even though this is a state law matter. The DOJ argued that this new law by the state of Washington is inherently discriminatory towards the Catholic Church and infringes on religious freedom as a whole. Now, the reason I wanted to make this video, of course, has to do with the fact that the Trump administration time after time after time comes to the defense of predators, but there's something else bubbling under the surface here. In my opinion, this bill has much less to do with confessionals. It has far more to do with tackling institutional abuse. The Catholic Church has said that their main concern about this bill is that it violates the sanctity of confessionals. And I am not questioning that concern. I understand, as someone who was baptized Catholic, why the church would be concerned about that, and they have a right to be concerned about that. However, confessionals are not where this bill is going to have teeth. The only way for a priest to be found guilty of violating this law in the confessional space is if the predator rats on the priest. The only way for there to be rock-hard evidence of a priest violating this in a confessional chamber is if there was a videotape of it. And that would certainly be a major infringement if the state decided to videotape or audio tape a confessional, and the church certainly doesn't allow for its congregants to tape their priests while in a confessional chamber. And in the 8 other states where there is no exception for confessional chambers, according to the New York Times, there have been no cases where a priest was found guilty of violating the mandatory reporting law. Where this new law could come into place is if there was an institutional case of sexual violence towards minors uncovered. If a priest commits violence against a child, and let's say their local bishop finds out about it, that bishop in the state of Washington could no longer put up their hands later in an investigation and say, well, I wasn't forced to report and I didn't feel like I should report because that was a member of my diocese. Single cases of violence turn into institution-wide cases of violence when other members of the institution are complicit. This bill will help stop that. In the United States, and essentially every state in the Union, if a doctor, if a nurse, if a technician finds out about another medical professional committing sexual violence against a child, they must report, and if they don't report, they could face charges themselves. That same law should apply to religious institutions. And when mandatory reporting laws are not in place, institutional abuse normally ensues. And as I wrap up this video, I just want to make something very clear. This is not a liberal versus conservative argument. I mentioned before there are 8 states that don't allow an exception for confessionals. 2 of those states are West Virginia and Tennessee, very conservative states. Tennessee is famous for having some of the most stringent religious freedom laws. These type of laws are not about ideology. They're about the rights of survivors and the ability to stop institutional abuse. And over and over and over again, the Trump administration decides to come on the side of rights of predators instead of the rights of survivors.